Well, it's not complying, but we wanted to do the Haitian National Anthem together, so I'd ask you to stand up, and I'll try to lead. I'm not the best singer, but I know it. And if you can, and I hope everyone has a copy and can follow along. Pour Haïti, nan nos ancêtres, yo c'est pour marcher, mais non la mer. Nan mi-temps, a fait pour gen traite, nous fait pour seul mettre nous en nous marcher. Mais non la mer pour Haïti, ka vin pi belle. En nous, mettez ensemble. Pour Haïti, non, nous, toutes ancêtres. Yo nous gen drapeau, tant que tout peuple. Yo c'est pour nous remel, mourir pour lui. C'est pas cadeau, blanc, t'es fait nous. C'est sans ancêtres, nous, yo qui t'es coulé. Pour nous, kembe drapeau, nous aussi pour le travail, mettez ensemble. Pour l'autre pays, qu'à respecter. Drapeau si là, c'est nom tout haïtien pour Haïti, non, non, ancêtres. Dieu c'est pour nous sécler, c'est pour nous planter. C'est notre terre. Toute force nous chita, c'est lui qui nous manger. En bitete, en voye ou à quel content, faut que t'es abaye. C'est clé, vous êtes femme ou garçon. Pour nous vivre avec cette force pour rien, nous pour Haïti, dans nos ancêtres, Dieu faut que nous capables, voyons garçon et femme voyant, monde parfait pour être avec nous. C'est ça que fait toute maman et tout papa, doit voyer mon yo l'école pour yo apprendre, pour yo connaître. Ça Cécile, tout ça, de Salitoya. T'es fait pour être nègre en bas code blanc. Moi, pour nous tout kembe hymne national ça, pour nous continuer à garder, réfléchir sur lui. Et oui, et parce qu'il y a un paquet de bagages là-dedans, vraiment, si nous mettons en pratique, et causer va régler. Mais tout, Mbadaka fin demander nous pour nous participer dans 10 hymnes, chanter hymne national avec nous. Samba dit nous que il y a plusieurs traductions faites. Mais dernier couplet, c'est un groupe qui relève boys là en bâtonnel qui fait un pile temps de travail. Pour te créer dernier couplet ça et qui t'a assuré pour te joindre non des femmes qui participaient dans la bataille révolution qui bat nous Haïti pour être capable de mettre là-dedans parce que en pile fois nous connaît et monsieur toujours devant mais sans nous-mêmes en pile bagaille pas qu'à fait et t'es un paquet de femmes qui t'ont participé dans la révolution haïtienne là bien nous connaissons yo et bien nous pas connaissons yo mais nous connaissons, nous campons là à cause de eux-mêmes. Merci. Et puis, you know, I'm translanguaging, which is the idea or the theory of my mentor, Ophelia Glacia. So I move between languages at ease sometimes. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce someone who is very dear to me and the community, Dr. Cécile Accilien, who will be moderating the panel this afternoon. Dr. Accilien is Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Maryland, specializing in Francophone, African, and Caribbean literatures, gender and sexuality studies, and film media studies. Her publications include By l'Audience, Haitian Popular Film Culture, published in 2023, The Anti-Racism World Language Classroom, published in 22, which she co-authored, Teaching Haiti in 21, and English Haitian Creole Phrasebook in 2010. Her writing has appeared in Truthout, can't say that, and Latin American Commentator. She chairs the editorial board for Women, Gender, and Families of Color since 2019, and is the outgoing president of the Haitian Studies Association, which she held down for us for 2 years. So we're very, very, very thankful for her brilliance, her work, and her commitment to Haitian studies. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us in New York and moderating this great panel. Help me welcome Dr. Accilien.
Honnête. Tout d'abord, m'ta besoin di tout le monde merci pour présence nous parce que nous connaissons qu'il y a un pile bagay qui a passé. Nous choisi pour nous là, alors ça montre engagement nous. I would like to thank everybody for being here this evening, and my job is at once simple and complex. I am going to try to read the biography of these two Mapu, but since it's in your program, and in the interest of time, I will just highlight just a few things. I'll start with Professor Marlene L, who is at Yale University. She's professor of French, African American Studies, and History. And she has so many books. I was telling her, I actually studied a rumor that there are two of her and not just one. And the latest one is The First and Last King of Haiti, The Rise and Fall of Henri Christophe. She has Tropics of Haiti, Recent the Literary History of the Haitian Revolution. And if you don't like to read, which some of my students don't, I'm not criticizing, she has an amazing podcast on the Neg Maron podcast. I think she has like 2 or 3 podcasts. I know I've used them in my class. And she basically take you on a fascinating tour. So I also recommend listening to her podcast. She has won many awards, including the Frederick Douglass Book Prize for her book, Awakening the Ashes, An Intellectual History of the Haitian Revolution. And again, you can read all about that in the program. The other speaker is Professor Franz Voltaire, who is a historian, filmmaker, and publisher based in Montreal. And Professor Voltaire has multiple degrees in history, political science, and international relations from universities in Chile and Canada. And for me, what is most important with Professor Voltaire is CIDIHCA. And I think many of us know him and his work for the fact that he has really been not just the last 10, 15 years when it has been easier to publish, but for the last 40 plus years, really giving opportunities for writers all over the world to publish on and about Haiti. So for me, it's really a great pleasure because these two Mapus, they highlight the fact that it's important to keep working so that we can change the narrative around Haiti and present a more complex and complicated Haiti. So we are in for a great treat. And what will happen after, they will each have about 20 minutes for their presentation. And then I will give very, very short remarks. I'm very intimidated because I am not a historian. I'm a literary and cultural studies scholar. And then we will open it up for questions. So please help me welcome Professor Daut and Professor Voltaire. Thank you.
We will begin. Okay. I will try. I have to say thank you to Lily to invite me to this panel. I will try to speak in French or in Creole because it will be easy for me. I don't know if it's a problem for the
Non,
people who are there.
pas de problème.
Pas de problème, donc nous pouvons parler en français ou en créole. Donc, hein? N'a pas en créole? Oui, 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 pas de problème sur ça. Hein?
Micro.
Oui. Donc, je remercie d'abord Lydie pour l'invitation. Takati, nous travaillons depuis peut-être plus d'un an, nous entrons dans des discussions pour nous voir comment nous allier l'ensemble de network, une série d'institutions qui travaillent sur Haïti. C'est important, surtout dans la conjoncture mondiale n'a plus aujourd'hui. Il est important que entre Montréal, New York, mais aussi à Paris, différents groupes qui travaillent sur Haïti au Cali. D'autant plus que question d'être là, puisque c'est aujourd'hui à ces deux dettes qu'on va parler, mais question d'être là, elle est fondamentale parce que sont questions qui commençaient à partir de 2003, dans des circonstances très particulières, les Aristides lançaient question restitution. Je pense que c'est mon premier élément pour nous comprendre que restitution par réparation. Restitution a touché essentiellement ordonnance du 17 avril 1825. Et ce que historien, comme Koustiga a parlé de la double dette. Et oui, Koustiga a fait un livre magistral sous question ça entre 1825 et 1915. Donc, je pense que l'on a parlé de restitution, il faut séparer de réparation, son bail qui concernait tout afro-descendant. Il concernait tout afro-descendant parce que réparation, il y a l'esclavage. Il y a la mise en esclavage de millions d'êtres humains que vous considérez comme des biens meubles, suivant tous les codes noirs, que les codes espagnols, que le code français, que le code anglais, qui, pendant certains 100 ans, 100 ans, 300 ans, 400 ans, si nous avons remonté depuis l'établissement esclavage là, eh bien, il concernait non seulement tout afro-descendant dans les Amériques, il concernait tout afro-descendant en Afrique, tout africain autour, parce que c'est une ponction majeure et suivant son crime contre l'humanité qui, nous avons dit, ou pas qu'à effacer. Ou pas qu'à effacer parce qu'il y a des conséquences majeures sur la société. Pour ne pas oublier que le dernier pays qui a aboli l'esclavage dans les Amériques, c'est le Brésil. Avant ça, c'était Cuba. Il n'a pas parlé de 1888. Mais même chaque fois, on a parlé, ce n'est pas de l'histoire ancienne. Et l'aime regarder mon grand-père qui était fait en 1864, ça veut dire s'il était fait aux États-Unis, il était esclave tout. Donc, on a parlé d'un problème qui concernait toute société américaine en premier lieu, puisque c'est en Amérique nouée, mais qui concernait toute société africaine. Alors, moi-même, j'ai intervenu sous contexte et conditions que Haïti, et Léo dit Haïti, ce n'est pas Haïti, c'est voyez un gouvernement autoritaire, un gouvernement dictatorial qui acceptait paiement une dette qui paillonne, puisque n'a pas de dons rançon, puisque quand le baron de Mako arrive avec bateau, il menaçait de bombardement Haïti. Son monde qui a long revolver sur le temps et puis tout faut payer. Donc, sont conditions que Jodia, même plusieurs historiens français, acceptaient que son rançon lui. C'est pas ton accord que tu as payé. Et c'est très difficile. C'est peut-être la première fois que monde qui gagne la guerre a payé monde qui perdu la guerre. Donc ça, c'est vraiment un cas exceptionnel. Et puis en France, il faut comprendre tout, on croit qu'il y a des éléments qu'il ne faut pas oublier, il y a un silence. Wolf Trout qu'on parlait de silencing the past. Effectivement, il y a un silence qui fait sous la révolution haïtienne, il y a un silence qui fait, je dis à tout sur l'Algérie. C'est deux problèmes que la France a confrontés. Et nous rendons compte que depuis 2003, il y a des avancées, des reculs, mais c'est un problème important pour Haïti, surtout dans les conditions haïtiennes. Bon, alors, moi-même, je PC, ouais, dans quel contexte que nous devons vivre en 1825. 1825, on est rappelé, c'est-à-dire Pétion mourit en 1818, Christophe suicidé en 1820, donc, Boyer, en 1818, les succédés à Pétion, Boyer pas aucun titre pour te succéder à Pétion. Vous voyez, pas participer comme officier supérieur dans la guerre d'indépendance. Mais bon, il faut peut-être trop loin pour nous ramener, nous, que officier était capable, dans la République de l'Ouest là, était capable de succéder à Pétion, il était pris en position pour Rigaud en 1811. Donc, Bourgelat ou Bonnet, qui était gagné, on a dit légitimité pour être capable de devenir président, il était déjà écarté au moment où Boyer, en 1818, accédait au pouvoir. Boyer, très rapidement, en 1820, c'est le suicide de Christophe. Du point de vue militaire, Boyer, très rapidement, il parle long campagne claire, avant même que ceux comme Richard, comme Romain qui participaient après la tentative de renversement de Christophe là, d'établir l'État du Nord, après Royaume du Nord là, eh bien Boyer lui opérait un mouvement très rapide. Bon, d'ailleurs, qui mouvement a échoué, puisque l'entrée Gonaïve, à ce moment-là, l'arrivée Gonaïve, il n'y a pas de toute troupe qui est là. Mais il fait deux mouvements qui, à mon avis, étaient capitales. Il bloqué Saint-Marc parce que le nom est Bonnet, qui est mon adversaire potentiel comme commandant Saint-Marc, qui a prêté jusqu'à sa mort commandant Saint-Marc. Et deuxièmement, l'aile rentrée au Cap, il va le nommer Mani. Mani, son carrière très particulière, c'est commandant de la garde d'honneur de Toussaint Louverture, et qui s'est illustré à la crête à Pierrot, mais Mani fait défection avec Trouplio, il était Saint-Marc, il fait défection dans l'Ouest. Et Mani, en ce sens, il vient adhésion les nouvelles élites dans le sud et l'ouest, parce que Mani, c'est aussi, et puis ça, son bail pour nous rapporter, son ancien livre, son noir libre. Et donc, Mani, effectivement, d'ailleurs, si la toponymie a renseigné nous, on a regardé les reconstruits Pétionville, que les seuls noirs libres, les seuls qui pas libres de couleur, c'est Mani, Lambert, Toussaint, toute rue l'ouverture, donc toute rue Pétionville, l'ensemble, ce sont des livres, ce que vous avez les têtes des anciens livres, pour différencier des livres nés à la fois de l'insurrection de 91, de la proclamation de son Sontonax en 1793 et 94. Donc, à partir de ce moment, Boyer arrive à réunir l'ensemble de l'ancien territoire de la colonie française. Mais deuxième élément qui est important, c'est qu'en 1822, au moment où Núñez de Cáceres proclamait l'indépendance sous le nom d'Haïti espagnol, Boyer pour organiser troupes et la rentrer dans cet Haïti espagnol que Núñez de Cáceres proclamait. Pour trois raisons, rapidement. Une, c'est que Núñez de Cáceres l'a proclamé République. Livrer lui-même, la perspective, c'est réunifier avec la Grande Colombie. Deux, c'est que il n'a pas aboli l'esclavage. Et ça, c'est le seul point, dit, idéologique d'entente dans toute île à ce moment-là. Et trois, ou bien la presqu'île de Samana, pour des raisons, nous sommes à l'époque de la navigation à voile. Or, tout bateau qui a traversé l'Atlantique, il faut longer les côtes de Samana avant de descendre sur nord-ouest là, sur nord-est là, pour arriver au Cap. Donc, effectivement, Samana a un intérêt stratégique pour cette armée haïtienne. Mais bon, l'autre problème, Samana tout. Parce que Samana, les colons français qui étaient fuis Saint-Domingue au moment de l'indépendance, ils ont établi l'esclavage, ils ont établi Samana et ils ont eu une négociation pour faire de Samana un nouveau territoire français. Donc alors, même contexte là. Donc en 1822, Boyer a unifié toute l'île là. Sans réellement que tu aies gagné des soulèvements militaires. L'intégrant partie des élites dominicaines, dans ce que certains historiens dominicains comme Moya Pons parlaient de la domination haïtienne, c'est-à-dire la situation côté les dirigeants du nouvel État unifié sont haïtiens essentiellement, mais dominicains tout aussi bien. Et on a dans le Parlement haïtien, donc notamment la Chambre des représentants des élites dominicaines qui participaient là-dedans. Donc, contrairement à la vulgate dominicaine, au discours narratif dominicain, d'ailleurs, c'est intéressant, toute proclamation Boyer faite en deux langues. Il fait en français, il fait en braillol. Donc, on rend compte que, et puis il y a des études qui étaient faites par une historienne dominicaine qui yo te bali comme tâche dans l'archive dominicaine, analyser des archives notariales. Et lui montrer toute relation qui gagnait entre ces élites haïtiennes et ces élites dominicaines à l'époque. Relation qui se perpétue encore aujourd'hui. Hein? Et vous rendez compte que vous participez à un mariage, vous participez à mais chef militaire au haïtien. Pas de colonisation haïtienne de ce qui deviendra la République dominicaine. Parce qu'en colonisation, tu as supposé un transfert de population, alors que la population haïtienne est plus de 600 000 à l'époque, et la population de la partie dominicaine, pas de 60 000 personnes. Donc rapidement, mais la colonisation, ça t'a dit, on l'autre modèle économique pour la mettre en place. Donc au moment de 1825, Boyer règne sur toute l'île. Donc, deuxièmement, à l'échelle internationale, la possibilité pour la France d'une reconquête reste impossible. Les deux tentatives françaises s'étaient imposées en ordonnance là en 1825, une tentative qui fait sous Soulouk tout, côté yo tenté de menacer que Soulouk n'a pas parlé, il résiste. Il dit, souveni pour vous-même, n'a vous-même. Donc, Français n'ont pas de capacité. Ils ont une capacité pour te bombarder la capitale là. Ils ont une capacité pour faire quelques blocus, mais pas de capacité de reconquête. Et à mon avis, déjà, les élites françaises ont commencé à abandonner l'idée d'une reconquête. Mais ça a été voulu essentiellement, et ça c'est, les colons qui ont réclamé un paiement d'indemnité. Laquelle indemnité, c'est 10% de ta remboursé à partir de 1700, je prends date chiffre à partir de 1789. Donc, on clair sur ça que possibilité pour réinstaller dans l'île était dérisoire. Il y a une tentative qui fait sous Louis XVIII, il a même envoyé des lettres côté la demandé, il dit à l'époque à Pétion, n'a pas reconnaître que 50 dirigeants comme des blancs, Et n'a pas le bail possibilité pour comprendre que nous sommes à Napoléon, moi-même tout, nous sommes contre Napoléon. Napoléon, son usurpateur littéraire, donc on y a souverain légitime nous tourner. Mais c'était impossible parce que dans le contexte de l'époque, le contexte côté la guerre d'indépendance, son guerre qui était à la fois son guerre d'extermination que les Français ont mené, et on rend nous compte que les Français ont voulu, c'était dépeupler l'île-là et repeupler. Donc, on a gagné au moins un consensus général que fin de l'esclavage, consensus général que la question de l'indépendance est fondamentale. Or, voyez, en 1821, juste avant la conquête, enfin, l'imposition de la souveraineté haïtienne sur l'ensemble de l'île, en 1821, c'est le Congrès de Panama. Congrès de Panama, rappelez-nous que l'appui donné en 1816 par Pétion à Bolivar, et puis il faut comprendre, donc ils qui soumettent à embargo, et on peut faire des comparaisons comme aujourd'hui, hein, les pays qui soumettent à embargo, qui capacité dirigeant pour résister à l'embargo pétrolier. D'abord, on y a un élément qui est important, c'est l'interdiction presque ou la pression qu'Haïti pas de marine. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a un cabotage, il y a des activités de corsaire, mais pas de marine. Et chaque tentative qui était faite pour faire commerce sous bateau haïtien, des fois, on capture, ils vendent en esclavage, ils vendent marin en esclavage. Donc, mon premier problème qui posait, c'est que Haïti soumet en embargo l'île pour toutes sortes de raisons, après une guerre dévastatrice. Sous garde des destructions qui fait, ne serait-ce que dans la plaine du Nord, je dirais c'est presque l'équivalent de la vente de la Louisiane. Destruction qui fait à toute plantation. Mais il y a un changement technologique qui opère entre-temps. C'est-à-dire Cuba prend l'entrée comme producteur à la fois dans ces années, commencer les débuts de colonisation sucrière à Cuba, commencer les débuts de colonisation caféière. Colonisation caféière était plus due dans l'Orient cubain avec, à partir de Santiago jusqu'à, les Punta Maïsi, Cuba, donc l'Orient cubain, où vient un développement de culture caféière et donc région caféière que les Français ont fait avec l'esclavage. Et donc, on vient une sorte de zone franco-espagnole, parce que colons français, les entrés en Haïti, les entrés Cuba, ils entraient avec, effectivement, sorte acadien en technologie du 19e siècle, alors que les colons espagnols étaient en technologie du 16e siècle. Bon, tout ça pour dire que au moment où Boyer prend le lancer, Haïti reste encore une fois isolé. Est-ce que maintenant, pour dirigeants haïtiens, essentiellement pour Boyer, parce que Boyer sont autocrates, en clair sous ça, que décision c'est lui qui prend, contre l'avis des fois même de ses conseillers, qui étaient hésitants, les signer ordonnance là. Donc, à mon avis, où vient gagner un élément qui est important pour nous comprendre, c'est que pour Boyer, parce qu'il faut nous rappeler nous tous que dirigeants jusqu'à Soulouk, c'est des coloniaux, ils ont fait Saint-Domingue, ils ont élevé, et peut-être on n'a pas insisté trop. À partir de 1794, c'est-à-dire quand l'Assemblée en France reprend qu'en 1793, son Tonax est déclaré, dit, la liberté générale, de 1794 à 1804, donc au moment de l'indépendance haïtienne, tout le monde qui a vu, c'est français. C'est tous ces français. L'armée haïtienne est une armée française. Donc, le contexte des coloniaux et surtout de Boyer, c'est un contexte de normalisation. Est-ce que vous pensez que normalisation, ça va l'entraîner des investissements français? Bon, vous pensez que c'était une erreur dramatique parce que 5 ans plus tard, après 1825, c'est la conquête de l'Algérie et désormais l'Algérie étant beaucoup plus riche que Saint-Domingue, l'Algérie va devenir le nouveau Saint-Domingue. Pour ça, c'est l'autre question. Deuxièmement, avant de finir, Ndaka dit, m'a essayé de comprendre quel contexte qui fait que mon signé une ordonnance pareille. Ordonnance, donc, à comprendre du point de vue français. Charles X est un monarque absolu. Charles X, et après que le signé, c'est le fameux milliard des émigrés. Pas oublier que les émigrés, les nobles qui étaient émigrés pendant la Révolution, ils ont indemnisé parce que c'était une nationalisation des biens du clergé, c'était une nationalisation des biens des émigrés. Libéral, sous même modèle ça, ordonnance là, c'est le contexte ça pour nous comprendre ordonnance Charles X là. C'est-à-dire indemniser les colons pour mettre question ça en arrière de problématiques françaises. Donc, pour moi-même, dirigeants haïtiens de l'époque, et surtout Boyer, ils ont pensé que peut-être en signant cette ordonnance, ils ont entrer dans le processus côté la France pour l'investir. Mais la France, en 1825, n'avait pas la capacité pour réintervenir Saint-Domingue. Et en plus, il y a des changements technologiques qui étaient faits à partir de ça. Ce n'est pas par hasard, pour ceux qui s'intéressent à la Jamaïque pour l'abandonner, m'a fini sous ça, l'a abandonné en grande partie, investissement majeur, l'implantation sucrière, parce que les terres sont épuisées. Les terres sont épuisées en grande partie, il faut régénérer. Et ce n'est pas par hasard que côté anglais au Bralé, ils vont aller en Guyane, des Merara, ils vont aller tout, Trinidad et Tobago, qui sont les nouvelles zones de production sucrière. Donc, il y a des conditions objectives qui changent. Par contre, et Cuba va devenir la nouvelle zone de présence, que ce soit dans le café, qui déplaçait le café haïtien, ou dans la canne à sucre, côté les techniciens, les Français, ils n'ont pas de capitaux pour entrer là-dedans. C'est même pas écrit Haïti, c'est-à-dire les généraux, qui système ils vont mettre en plein lieu côté que tu as un sucre. Ils vont mettre un système de moitié, parce qu'ils n'ont pas de ressources, ils n'ont pas ni technologie, ni savoir-faire pour reprendre la grande production. La grande production demande des savoir-faire, demande des technologies, demande au marché. Ce qui n'est plus le cas. Parce que la France déjà avait remplacé la canne à sucre en grande partie par le sucre de betterave. Donc pour moi-même, il faut essayer de comprendre ensemble éléments ça pour nous comprendre dans quelles conditions ça fait là. Parce qu'en général, nous comprenons sur un plan strictement politique, mais nous sous-estimons le contexte économique. C'est même gens-là, études qu'ils ont fait sur Haïti, ils n'ont pas jamais abordé les questions de production. Sauf peut-être très rarement au 19e siècle, des gens comme Edmond Paul, avec l'impôt sur le café, qui avait abordé le grand problème, et Haïti va le vivre pendant tout le 19e siècle, là, sur la rente caféière payée par la paysannerie haïtienne, qui va produire de la valeur comme l'abeille produit du miel. Et donc, c'est pas par hasard, c'est des spéculateurs qui vont le ramasser. Donc, maintenant, il finit à continuer la conversation tout à l'heure.
Okay. And now we have Professor Daut, who's going to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being in here this evening instead of out there where it's beautiful and nice weather. So on April 17th, 2025, Emmanuel Macron, the current president of France, you might have seen, issued a communiqué in which he established a joint Franco-Haitian commission destined to study the history and memory of the indemnity, which he called a heavy burden that France had put onto Haiti. However, there were many things missing from the communiqué, one of which was the question of restitution, a word not used anywhere in the communiqué, reparations. But on the historical level, there were also many, many problems. For example, Macron dates the beginning of this struggle between Haiti and France to 1814. And he does that for a very particular reason, because that's when Louis XVIII was restored to his throne for the first time. And this effectively allows him to absolve Napoleon of his crimes against humanity on Saint-Domingue and against independent Haiti, and also to forget the history of slavery and France's instantiation of a torturous system of slavery on the island. So I want to take us back to the years before, well before 1825, because I think it's very important that whatever conversations, memory projects, historical projects will ensue and come about from this Franco-Haitian Commission, that we must not let the French reshape of the narrative to re-silence the past by behaving as if it was the monarchs. This is a very particular language he's using that allows him to reinforce the idea that French republicanism is egalitarian and that the problem is the monarchs and royalists. And so in what I want to present today, I want to talk about how this is an entire centuries-long struggle that did not begin or end with the Bourbons. So if I took us to, for example, the Archives Nationales in France, which I always say, these are essentially evidence, lockers. They catalog the crimes of the French. And in fact, in the Archives Nationales in Pierrefitte, there are dozens of manuscripts and pamphlets from the first 2 decades of the 19th century that prove that France immediately plotted to retake the island and restore slavery, their words, soon after the Haitian Declaration of Independence. So this was not just when the Bourbons came back to power. Nearly all of the Saint-Domingue restoration proposals under Napoleon and his successors, Louis XVIII, Charles X, they suggested exterminating the majority of the Haitian population, again, the specific word they used, if their leaders refused to submit to another word the French used, their supremacy. These genocidal takeover plots threatened independent Haiti under all its first leaders, including Haiti's founder, Dessalines, assassinated in 1806, Henri Christophe as king, who ruled in the north until 1820 when he committed suicide, and Alexandre Pétion, of course, simultaneously president over the Republic in the south and west until 1818. By the time their successor, President Jean-Pierre Boyer, signed the Indemnity Agreement in 1825, the French had in fact been openly plotting to restore slavery and exterminate the Haitian populace for decades. This story of plotted genocide is essential to understanding the threat of violent war, not merely financial exploitation, that 19th century Haitians lived with ever since, in the words of Dessalines, they dared to be free. But as the Haitian historical sociologist Jean Casimir made painfully clear in a documentary about the Haitian Revolution from 2020 called Independence or Death, the whole enterprise of Atlantic slavery was genocidal. The yearning to exterminate is germane to colonial slavery, and all roads in colonial thought lead there. If we want to understand how and why the indemnity came about in the first place, we must acknowledge and force the French to acknowledge the genocidal mentality of the colonists and enslavers who invented the scenario whereby they were the ones who had been wronged by the Haitian Revolution, rather than rightly overthrown by the people they were torturing and enslaving. Of course, they called the revolutionaries, the freedom fighters, brigands, terrorists, insurrectionists, every epithet. So the French, after they formally take over the western side of the island in 1697, they accelerate the course of plantation slavery by leaps and bounds. Before the 18th century had concluded, the French had forcibly transported nearly 900,000 captive Africans to use their very human hands to painstakingly produce the sugar, coffee, cotton, and indigo that enriched white Europeans at the expense of Black Africans. Those captive Africans who survived the long journey from their continent to the Caribbean ordinarily arrived on Saint-Domingue in a terrible state. Sold off to the highest bidders, their misfortunes only increased when their enslavers branded their family names on their chests using hot irons. By the 1770s, slavery in Saint-Domingue was already infamous. The French naturalist Hilaire d'Auberteuil, sent by the French crown to Saint-Domingue for the purpose of recording the colony's natural history, lamented the sorry state of affairs that had led Saint-Domingue to become a society of terror and torture. These are his words. And remember, he's sent there by the King of France. The majority of the Negroes from Guinea ordinarily die after the first 3 years of being transported. And the laborious life of a Negro born in the country does not usually surpass 15 years. Since 1680, we have introduced more than 800,000 Negroes into the colony, he continued. Nevertheless, at this time, 1770 to 1772, there exist only 290,000. It is not diseases that have weakened the Black population to this extent, he concluded. It is the tyranny of their masters. Hilaire d'Auberteuil hoped that French laws governing slavery, called the Code Noir, could prevent the colonists from continuing their abuse, which he noted was harming the colony economically. He said the slaves perished daily under chains or under the whip and were knocked out, suffocated, and burned without any judgment of guilt. Asking the people of France to hear these lamentations resulted in the censorship of the French naturalist's book. They pulled it out of circulation because its truths, even though Hilaire d'Auberteuil was no abolitionist, no anti-slavery activist, he's writing this in order to reform the system, suggest reforms, not eliminate it. But if, in fact, it's the very tortures described by Hilaire d'Auberteuil that would eventually inspire the successful slave rebellion in 1791 that forced the French to formally abolish slavery on the island in 1793-1794. Napoleon Bonaparte came to power in France in 1799. Yet, even though he professed to be a profound French Republican, he was animated by the same prejudices against enslaved Black people and Africans as the monarchs of the Ancien Régime. Bonaparte, of course, sends his brother-in-law Leclerc on his infamous expedition to bring back slavery in 1802, but Napoleon, in fact, also expressed explicitly racist beliefs during his rule, such as saying that if he had been in power at the time of the abolition in 1794, he would never have entertained such an idea. And in fact, he would have fought on behalf of the British to stop it from happening. So when he sends Leclerc, this expedition is going to take on the same genocidal and prejudicial cast from the person who created it. Leclerc wrote to Bonaparte on October 2nd, 1802, that the mission in Saint-Domingue could only succeed if the French were, quote, to destroy all the Negroes of the mountains, men and women, to only keep around children younger than 12 years old, to destroy the majority of those in the plain, and to not leave alive a single person of color who has ever worn an epaulette. When Leclerc died of yellow fever in November 1802, Saint-Domingue's former governor, General Rochambeau, succeeded him. And he stated in no uncertain terms when he addressed Bonaparte in April 1803 that even after the arrest of Louverture, the ailing French military was in need of, quote, 3 forceful combined expeditions to fight, disarm, and chain the Negroes forever. Slavery must be proclaimed again in this realm, he said, and the Code Noir made much more severe. I even think that for a time the masters must be given the right of life and death over their slaves, end quote. So although Haitians definitively won independence in 1804, Of course, France did not recognize the new nation and continued to claim that Saint-Domingue was their colony. Ordinary members of the French populace and French officials alike never stopped scheming for the restoration of Saint-Domingue. In 1806, Saint-Domingue's former finance secretary, Henri Peru, addressed a detailed plan for reconquest to Napoleon, who made himself, of course, emperor in 1804. He said, if we only listened to revenge and justly irritated spirits, we would have to destroy every person in Saint-Domingue beyond the age of 8. This is him describing popular sentiment in France. Though aware that many in France would have loved nothing more than to witness such an extermination, Peru proposed instead that only those who dare to fight should be destroyed. We could deport to a colony not yet settled, anyone else wearing an epaulette. A former French general named Kerverseau, stationed in Saint-Domingue during the Leclerc expedition and who had initially gone to the eastern side of the island after Haitian independence, also sent detailed reconquest plans to Napoleon. Like his predecessors, Kerverseau spoke of the need to, quote, exterminate the entire population, including the children. No conciliations for the Negroes should be made at all, Kerverseau warned. They want to be free, but the honor of the French name, the security of the West Indies, and indignantly outraged humanity cannot allow it, he said. The aura that once guaranteed the safety of the master and allowed one man to live in peace among 200 slaves is gone, Kerverseau concluded. The black man knows today that the white man is only a man. He knows that by killing the masters, he has already acquired independence. I should say also that one of the reconquest plans given to Napoleon was written also by André Rigaud, who possibly wrote that plan and then was released from prison on the basis of it. Even though Napoleon was busy fighting wars around the world and seemed for a time to lose sight of his loss in Saint-Domingue, it is true that his Bourbon successors wasted no time trying to come up with new schemes to retake the island. In 1814, under Louis XVIII's authority, the French Minister of the Marine sent 3 spies to Haiti. Their mission was to coerce Haiti's leaders to surrender. Malouet threatened that if they did not submit, the Haitian people would be, quote, treated as barbarous savages and hunted down like maroon Negroes, end quote. One of the spies, Doxian Lavais, even sent a letter to Christophe in which he unabashedly revealed that France was ready to, quote, replace the population of Haiti, which would be totally annihilated by the forces sent against it, end quote. After King Henry's men captured Medina, one of Malouet's men, and confiscated his instructions, the Baron de Vatte, one of the most prominent members of the Haitian king's administration, lamented that, these are his words, 25 years of misfortune and experience had failed to correct the irascibility of the ex-colonists. They have not let go of one iota of their iniquitous and barbaric system. They have not ceased to provoke the cabinet of Louis XVIII to lead it, like that of Bonaparte, into sending a similar expedition against us. They have not only advised it, but they have also offered, just like the first time, pecuniary means for it to be undertaken. First, they sent us spies, then commissioners, all of them ex-colonists, to insult us and offer us the choice between slavery or death. They conceived of plans of attacks, plans of extermination in their writings and pamphlets, all of which make nature tremble and which violate all the laws of religion, justice, morality, and humanity. Finally, they have proposed to exterminate our entire population, even suckling babies. Pétion behaved differently in the context of these French spies, who also went to his side of the island. At a meeting that he took, in fact, it took place one day after he responded with a kind of conciliatory letter to a similar missive that Christophe had written. The president told his 2 closest advisors, Joseph Inginac and Jean-Pierre Boyer, that he would never consent to French reconquest. He did, however, open another fatal door when he said he was not opposed to paying, quote, a pecuniary indemnity to compensate the former French colonists for the loss of their properties. Christophe, for his part, was adamant that no indemnity would be paid, and he had an uncanny ability to thwart France's colonial games of manipulation. But the biggest threat to the kingdom's sovereignty in his eyes remained on Haiti's own shores. He felt perfectly capable of standing his ground on the world stage, even when friends like Thomas Clarkson urged him to consider a treaty of indemnity with France. On November 20th, 1819, Limonade, one of Christophe's secretaries, sent an important missive to the renowned British abolitionists. He insisted that any request for the people of Haiti to indemnify the French ex-colonists would quite simply be, in his words, inadmissible. Limonade went on to note that Christophe did not intend to deviate even, quote, 1 iota from the principles set forth in his November 1816 proclamation banning French people and their ships from the island. Christophe and his writers in the kingdom had very publicly insisted from the start of Haitian independence that the Haitian people would not and could not indemnify the French colonists. The Gazette Royale printed this stern rebuke in 1815 after learning of Pétion's offer. If Pétion tallied up the pain and torture the ex-colonists exacted upon the people they enslaved on this island, he would see on what side there would be compensation if there were to be any. And besides, what link could still exist between the master and the slave who has broken his chains? In his writings, Baron de Vatte repeatedly insisted, "It is the recognition of our independence that will forever protect us from the tyranny of our oppressors. Without this precondition, no treaty, no agreement," he said. "We want to be free and independent, and we will be despite the dishonorableness of the ex-colonists. Our independence will be guaranteed by the tip of our bayonets." Yet Christophe's successor, Boyer, eventually came to see the matter differently. In September 1819, the Royal Gazette of Haiti reported that in some Parisian journals, there were reports that Boyer had opened negotiations with Louis XVIII, which was true. The papers implied that the conversation was trending in a favorable direction for the ex-colonists. "We have been assured that Boyer's envoy has arrived in Paris with certain proposals whereby the value of the amount of all the properties belonging to the French in that part of Saint-Domingue where he commands will be reimbursed to the dispossessed colonists per term in 20 years. The paper went on to say, "King Henry does not appear to be disposed to such an agreement, like President Boyer." Another French paper is quoted in the Gazette as having wryly concluded that Pétion's successor, as we can see, Pétion's successor is following in his footsteps. He wants to make the people of the Southwest beholden to the ex-colonists. But of course, when the French couldn't re-enslave the Haitian people, Louis XVIII tried to implement another reconquest plan in 1816. They settled for impoverishing them. Baron de Macau, whom Louis XVIII's brother Charles X sent to deliver the disastrous Indemnity Ordinance, arrived in Haiti in July 1825, accompanied by a squadron of 14 brigs of war carrying more than 500 cannons. With the threat of violence looming on July 11, 1825, Boyer signed the document, which stated, "The present inhabitants of the French part of Saint-Domingue shall pay, in 5 equal installments, the sum of 150 million francs destined to indemnify the former colonists." But the colonists' dreams of what they were owed were as delusional as their belief in their superiority. The Haitian historian and poet Charles-Hérard Dumel, who lived through the revolution and was employed in the Republic's government, wrote in 1824, "It must be noted that our eternal detractors, the ex-colonists, had proposed in 1805 that after their new conquest of Haiti, an easy feat according to them, 700 million francs would be paid to them for the restoration of their properties and delivered to them gradually and by way of a loan secured by national credit. So the first amount the French in fact asked for is 700 million francs. And the instructions given to Macau actually revealed that the determined sum of 150 million francs was meant to provide merely 1 year's revenue for any colonist with a documented claim. The instructions also reminded the French diplomat that his mission was to deliver the ordinance as a fait accompli. "My mission to the people of our former colony is not a negotiation," Macau wrote. "I'm limited to explaining to them on what conditions His Majesty of France consents to grant their independence fully and entirely. I lack the powers to make the slightest modifications to the proposal of which I am the bearer." The French government hoped that the accompanying ships of war, this is in the instructions, would, quote, "excite distress in the government of Haiti," end quote. The instructions given to Macau by the French Minister of the Marine were marked very secret and stated that if the Haitian government, quote, did not demonstrate gratitude for what His Majesty of France deigns to do for them, Macau was to announce to the leaders of that government that henceforth they will be treated as enemies of France, that already a squadron is ready to establish the most rigorous blockade in front of the ports of the island, that this squadron will soon be reinforced by other vessels sent from our ports, and that the interruption of all maritime commerce will cease for Saint-Domingue only after this island will have submitted without condition to the domination of France. So they are effectively proposing to starve them by blockading the ports. Some contemporary scholars have questioned whether or not Haitian leaders, and Boyer specifically, believed that France was capable of bringing war and retaking the island. Yet 19th century Haitians were the ones who had to live through the constant threats of violence against them. And in fact, they were initially relieved to see their former enslavers finally recognize Haitian independence. The historian and politician Denis Vandelorme wrote of Boyer's consent that it had at first seemed great because Haiti was going to avoid war. This administration, which held the entire island in peace for 25 years, Delorme wrote, as a result of the new treaty concluded with Charles X, saw itself freed from apprehensions of a new war with the former metropole, which had hitherto preoccupied the public mind. Boyer also believed that recognition of Haiti's independence from France would lead to recognition from the rest of the world. But racism and empire were stronger pulls than humanity and justice. The United States, of course, did not recognize Haitian independence until 1862, when the Civil War had already begun. So I'll leave you with the words of the Baron de Vaté, who wrote in 1819 that it is the people who always suffer the most when their leaders make mistakes. They pay for these with their lives, with their souls, and with their livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you to you both. There are so many things. I will just highlight a few key things, and then I am going to provoke a bit because, first of all, thank you. I appreciate the way both of you provided key context. Professor Voltaire highlighted the issue of reunification that was happening and the fact that we cannot talk about reparation, restitution, indemnity without contextualizing them both politically, socially, and economically, and to also understand Boyer as an autocrat dictator. And Professor Daut specifically focuses on what was happening, because there are sometimes these arguments that, oh, okay, well, did Boyer, were the French really going to do that? Did the French have the capacity to do that? And I want to provoke by saying, it seems like Professor Voltaire, you don't think, you seem to suggest that the French at that time, given what was happening in Algeria, because again, France wanted to colonize the whole world. I mean, even today, the French colonizes so well. You know, we still see it in Asia, everywhere, but you seem to suggest that perhaps they were not going to return and colonize Haiti, whereas Professor Daut is saying, no, look at the archives. We have the proof is in the pudding, as they say. They are saying they have detailed ideas of not only that they were going to do it, but several times, but the how. So I would like to ask you to talk on that, please.
Well, I think that until 1825, the signature of the ordinance by Charles X, French king has effectively the problem of how to recolonize Haiti. Because in 1815, when the Congress of Vienna, only French has the possibility to have a commerce of slaves. So that means that the vision to recolonize Haiti. The problem is that French has, in my understanding, no capacity to recolonize Haiti. When you have an intervention for 40,000 soldiers in the expedition, you know, you have to think of logistics. War is essentially logistics. It's not tactics. It's essentially logistics. French has no capacity to do that until certainly the discussion in the French ministries. You have the colonists, you have the merchants. The merchants want to reopen the commerce with Céret. Until that, you have, for the embargo, they have with Céret, Saint Barthélemy was a Swedish small colony, Saint Barth, but they sold as a neutral power French perfume, French wine. They disguise that at neutral commodities. Donc French until 1825. After 1825, and effectively after 1830, when you have a new government in France with the Orleans, French began the conquest of Algeria. It was a violent, it was a criminal activities. You have to read Bugeaud, who was the commander-in-chief of the French army, the Duc d'Aumale, who was, you see that and you say, okay, it was a killing of thousands of people. It was a very savage repression of the population of Algeria. At the moment, Algeria will transform in French department. The war in Algeria lasts for 40 years, 40 years. But after that, Algeria became the crown of the jewel. Is that in the sense that after 1830, we forgot in a lot about Haiti. Now, French continue to put pressure that Haiti paid the annual for the debt, the annual for the debt. But I remember that in 1849 was doing Soluk when they sent an expedition to Haiti. Mais on pas de payer, Soluk dit ben ok, nous pas accepter lui, la boum. Donc à partir de ce moment, toute pression, c'est pour ce que les économistes, les historiens comme Gaillard ont appelé la double dette. Nous allons prêter quoi pour nous payer, ça ne pas qu'à payer. Et donc, notre enchaînement avec la dette, et à ce moment-là, et la France bénéficiait pour ses marchandises d'un traitement préférentiel. Et juste m'a fini avec ça, pendant tout des commerces extérieurs haïtiens, c'est-à-dire les biens de luxe calés pour minorité cap dominé, yo relativement peu taxés, c'est ça la France vend par rapport aux biens de consommation courante qui allaient pour la population générale. Là. Pendant tout le temps ça, c'est ça, Edmond Paul en partie dénoncé, même s'il était dénoncé l'autrement, ça aurait l'impôt sur le café, c'est-à-dire que ces paysans haïtiens qui payaient dette là. Et donc, l'aime dit paysans haïtiens, ils viennent produire tant qu'on et abeilles a produit miel, et donc un système de spéculateurs et de quelques exportateurs. Généralement, les n'a pas des bourgeoisie haïtienne à l'époque, sont bourgeoisie étrangère. Ce sont des maisons de commerce extérieur, évidemment, qui prennent un triple rôle jusqu'à la Banque nationale sous Salomon, qui rôle banquier, qui rôle exportateur, et même leur vie ouverte, Banque nationale là, pas de fonction de crédit, contrairement à Salomon ou de la foresterie qui a négocié le dépensé. D'ailleurs, c'est ça que fait un auteur tant que Frédéric Martin était critiqué. Lui-même, ça le fait. Il vient service de trésorerie de l'État haïtien. Donc, on entre dans un système jusqu'à l'occupation américaine. Et à partir de l'occupation américaine, et je veux dire, Américains reprennent, parce que la France sortit ruinée de la Première Guerre mondiale, ils reprennent payer reliquat dette haïtienne vis-à-vis de la France. Et à partir de ce moment, on entre dans l'autre système, côté cébral, à partir de l'occupation américaine, Citibank qui prend la relève. Et d'ailleurs, même si Haïti m'a fini sous sa tâche, Haïti payait en partie de dette là, en 1935, quand l'État haïtien prend contrôle de la banque, eh bien, l'Américain a continué jusqu'en 1947, sous-estimé, parce que et a siégé dans le conseil d'administration banque là jusqu'en 1947. Parce que jusqu'en 1947, il a pris le pays en point de 1922. Donc, pour moi-même, question d'être là, il faut nous lier à son système, ce que l'appelait la double dette, un système d'exploitation qui va empêcher tout type de développement dans le pays. Parce que toute partie, il va le payer, ou soit maintien élite, soit garder budget, c'est l'armée, l'Assemblée nationale, système et les autorités politiques. Et en général, il y a très peu d'investissements qui fait, ou pour pas dire, pas presque investissement. Écoutez, nous allons monter un système scolaire. Oui, il y a dit ces dettes-là, mais en même temps, tout une complicité entre ceux qui négocient les emprunts sur les places parisiennes et les banquiers français.
Yeah, I would say I think we disagree because about 1825. Because in 1824, when another of the missions that Boyer sends to Paris fails, they try to negotiate with Louis XVIII, but he's dead set on suzerainty, which would make Haiti a protectorate. He offers all kinds of things. You could stay general of the island. We won't even meddle in your laws. And if the two people he sends don't have the power to make this agreement, it's not what they want, they reject it and the mission fails. When they come back to Haiti, Boyer orders all the correspondence and negotiations with the French to be published. They publish it in a book describing all of the different offers that the French have made over the years. And he's trying to show all the contradictions in their offers, the indemnities, the suzeraineties, we'll give you lettre de blanc, so you'll be considered white, all the different things that the French have proposed over the years. And at the end of this, the purpose is he tells the Haitian people they need to all work on fortifying the forts, gather their weapons, and be ready to fight. And this is in 1824. So it is surprising then when Mako arrives in 1825 with all of these ships and cannons that Boyer signs, unless you think about the fact that while they were willing to go to war, the one thing they couldn't combat was actually the economic embargo, in essence, which was going to be put into place. That was the threat. If we back up, there were people there who would have had memory of what the U.S. embargo did. When the U.S. embargo first was announced in 1806, it caused all kinds of shortages, grain shortages, flour shortages on the island, and people died. The hospitals didn't have equipment that they needed to keep people alive. So the idea of this was not abstract, to say we're going to blockade all your ports and nothing will ever be delivered here again until essentially you starve to death. It's not abstract. It's a reality that could come to pass. So whereas they may have been willing to fight because potentially they knew that France didn't really have the means to sustain the fight, and also their motto was independence or death anyway. But then the French changed the game by creating this system whereby Haiti was going to effectively become a debtor nation when it hadn't been one before, because no country was willing to lend them money. So they completely changed the nature of the game. And when you look at French colonialism, what you said about them being really great colonizers, is you see that is what it is about. It is an economic system. When you see the colonial franc system that they put in place in West Africa, when you see that they became masters of a different kind of colonial enterprise whereby you could get independence, but you could never really be free of their presence. And that is, to me, clear in West Africa also as well from an economic standpoint.
Just one more question and thoughts before I turn it to the audience. So if we come back to the present, as many of us here know, and what 2022 New York Times had this big expose, what Haitian scholars have been saying for centuries, but now the New York Times say it and it's valid. And there's been a lot of back and forth, and the French, and France is not doing well economically. So we also have to contextualize what's going on right now, because many of the African countries are now saying, take your foot off our neck. We don't care. Get out. When we look at what's happening in Niger, Burkina. So that's also complicate things. And we know there's no willingness. But some of the conversation I have been hearing about the debt are two parts. On the one end, the legal aspect. So I would like for you to talk about the legal, because my understanding, and again, I'm not a historian, is that we know the families who benefited from this. We know that the Eiffel Tower in part was built on the back of this debt, the interest. So how do legally, what can be done? So that's my first question. And my second question, because this conversation are happening, giving the whole scandal with Petro-Caribbean, what's going on in Haiti right now. Somebody will say, okay, Haiti does not have the capacity, even if France were to give the money. And we know the debt is very much connected to white supremacy, racism, dehumanization of Black people. What do you answer to these questions? And you can answer in French, Creole, English, Spanish.
Bon, d'abord, moi-même, si je parle, il faut séparer Petro-Caribéenne. Petro-Caribéenne sont prêts liés. C'est pas un don, c'est pas une subvention, c'est pas une dette liée, sont prêts. Au Haïti à des conditions très particulières. Donc, son bail pour nous séparer de questions restitution.
Non, excusez-moi, question c'était plus un exemple, tant que tellement de magouille,
oui, mais
tellement, tant que c'est un argument que nous sommes d'accord, nous capables de dire peut-être son faux argument, mais comment pour restitution faite, côté que, ou bail kobla, et puis c'est dans poche on moun la li. Comment, qui ça pour nous faire, pour nous taouer, qui j'en nous imaginer que en restitution capable faite dans moment ça, avec Jean Haïti hier. C'est avocat du diable.
Moi-même, moi pense que son illusion de penser que son bail qui pourra le résoudre à court terme. On clair sur ça que on est ma propre phrase que Clémenceau t'a dit. Clémenceau t'a dit l'aime mon problème crée en commission.
Après ça,
Clémenceau c'est le père de la victoire, c'était le premier ministre, président du Conseil en France au moment de la Première Guerre mondiale. Donc, qu'on a sauté, on pense que aussi t'es opposé à la colonisation française. Pour me rappeler ça, simplement. Donc, il dit moi-même, même au contexte, il dit l'aime mon problème crée. Parce quoi te dit, ben moi-même, l'aime mon problème crée en commission, en commission. Bon, et pas oublier que Pasqua te dit le tout, monsieur dit, l'aime gagnant, monsieur dit, et le te dit, mais monsieur Pasqua, vous faites trop de promesses. L'idée dit, les promesses n'engagent que ceux qui y croient. Bon, une fois ceci dit, moi-même, moi pensais que nous l'avons processus, côté question politiquement des soulevements 2003. Li abordé par des historiens, li abordé New York Times, l'aile lancé article Catherine Porter, li gon écho, parce que tout journaux français reprend question ça. Mais pas oublier tout que les Hollandais West with Mickey, ils étaient dit son réparation morale. Nous avons un problème, mais son réparation morale. Ce discours était fait. L'ELTEAL inauguré mémorial de l'esclavage en Guadeloupe, l'ELRIV en Haïti, il dit son réparation morale. Donc, nous reconnaissons ça, mais nous ne pas de faire ça. Bon, nous connaissons ici, là, ça arrivait souvent. Après, au fin, détroncer, que ce soit le Guatemala, nous dit, bon, nous regrettons, vraiment, c'est ma faute, c'est ma très grande faute, et puis bon, nous passons à autre chose. Donc, pour moi-même, son processus lié, dans lequel, nous soulevons question de restitution, il y a à la fois une dimension légale, parce que, effectivement, il faut changer des lois en France pour poser question ça. Il y a une dimension économique, il faut fixer qui montant réparation est. Il y a des dimensions historiques.
Restitution ou réparation?
Restitution. Tous les deux ont le même problème. Personne, réparation, je pense que c'est plus compliqué encore parce que personne ne va l'aborder. Parce que réparation a touché tout le monde. Il touche toute puissance coloniale, même la Suède, même la Norvège, qui à l'époque dépendait de la Suède, il touchait tout le monde. Tout le monde a participé à la commerce là. Tout le monde participait à la commerce la traite négrière. Tout le monde participait là-dedans, enfin les puissances occidentales. Maintenant, sous question restitution même, je pense que ou l'on processus qui à la fois tenant compte de situations politiques en France, là, de la montée d'extrême droite avec le Rassemblement national, des discours qui sont faits aujourd'hui en France. Jacques a vu en France, l'État a dit nous ça, eh bien, c'est pas aussi évident. Macron doit faire une déclaration, puisque dans 2 ans, le pape là encore. Et donc, s'ils font commission, ça va coûter rien, dit bon, ma prend commission, on va mettre des historiens qui parlent de tant de façons, de temps pour constituer commission, de temps pour commission font travail, de temps pour arriver sous l'île, il n'est pas président encore. Donc, et nous pas connaissons si c'est Marine Le Pen pas qu'un président, mais si c'est l'extrême droite ou dans la droite, je ne peux pas aborder question ça. Donc, il faut prendre son processus lié. Tu sais, moi-même toujours dit, bon monde qui était, m'a fini sous ça, oui, mais bon monde qui était dit moi, l'autre jour il dit moi, à la jour là-bas ça toujours. Il me dit monsieur, et ou là vous ça toujours, me dit oui, j'ai passé un pacte avec le combat, pas avec la victoire. Donc, nous l'avons situation côté n'a pas oublié, nous connaissons que son processus qui prend le temps, qui va pas le résoudre qu'on y a, surtout dans l'état du monde actuel. Donc nous connaissons que c'est pas nous qu'à résoudre demain matin. Nous croyons que son illusion de penser que pas bon monde qui va le et puis bon, pas penser que même sous l'État, pas bon monde qui va le faire chèque pour dire mes chèques là. C'est-à-dire que c'est des négociations, des créations d'institutions pour gérer les de qui conditions liées, même pas une solution pour me dire qui sauvera là, comment on va l'aborder. Montaka dit effectivement, il y a des constructions d'infrastructures, il y a des bon paquet de problèmes, mais ça, c'est les commissions qui viennent pour essayer d'avancer.
Est-ce que gain fin en commission, c'est ça une plus grande question?
Oui, mais commissions sont filles qui dirigent.
Est-ce que gain femme haïtien vaillant tant que grand toya? Parce que regardez neuf yo, regardez ça qui passe bon. Ça sont l'autre conférence, ça oui.
Well, I would say on the question, I mean, I agree that the Petua Caribe, it's a red herring. Because then you throw it that's irrelevant to the legal case. The legal case is separate from whatever is happening in Haiti right now. Doesn't mean that what happened in the past wasn't a crime against humanity. The other thing I would say is, if you read the communiqué very closely, it talks a lot about history and memory, and this is kind of Macron's thing. He says, we're going to study Algeria, pas d'excuses, no excuses, but that can be read very differently. Like, we're going to lay it all out, but we're also not going to apologize. Because during the summer where we had lots of protests, 2020, following the wake of George Floyd's killing, and there were Black Lives Matters protests all over the world, there were protests in France, and people talked about removing the Colbert statue. Colbert is the one who wrote the Code Noir. And Macron gave a speech and said, we will not remove any statues. We will remember. So remembering in history means something very different in the context of French governmental thought than it does to those of us who look at an expose as the first step towards restitution, as the first step towards rectifying a wrong. That is not what it means on the French side. And what the first thing I thought of after reading the communiqué was, if they would like some studies, then I will give them Frédéric Marcelin's book on the Indemnity from 1894. I mean, the idea that what we need in this moment is more study is actually ridiculous. Haitian historians have been writing voluminous things about every aspect of the indemnity. And yes, the New York Times did a favor in the sense of making the French government have to pay attention instead of just ignoring all the scholarship and studies and papers and books that are being written. So yes, for that, but it has simply led to, in my opinion, more desire to study and then to leave it at that. And I definitely think that this is an easy win for Macron on a certain level, because he will not be there to see the work of this commission, and who knows what kind of government will be in place.
And let me see, we published a book 2 years ago with Gusty, with Daut, with the French economist Piketty, with French historian about the debt and about the restitution. And so you have a lot of work. Even a French guy, Blancpain, has made some studies on the restitution. All the books are published where they
Jean
have
Brière.
a lot of people have published books on that question. And so it's not that we need, as you said, more studies. We know what happened, but it's a decision not to make a decision.
Okay. There is a mic that can go around, so if you can go and ask your question, I see you, the lady, and if you can go on the mic because we don't have.
Okay,
We
I
don't
don't
have
have questions, but I can add to the discussion a little bit. I agree with the university professor that they were going to re-enslave the Haitians. You said no, the French did not have
The
capacity to do.
They have the
But
will.
they were
have the
going
will.
to, and one of the reasons that they would have done it, the U.S. would have supported them and give them the capacity. Because
No,
even though after,
not at the moment.
you
No,
have
you have not
a lot
you
of
have the
things.
capacity.
Oh yeah, you have to read a
I
little bit
understand.
more because after the independence, from 1804 all the way to 1862, the U.S. was trading with Haiti, even though there was an embargo. Right? And they were always at the ports and demanding payments or demanding not to pay for port fees and so on and so forth. However, the reason that France went back to Haiti is because in 1823, Alexander I of Russia recognized Haiti's independence to actually how would you say, to antagonize France, because in 1812 France had the audacity to invade Russia. 45 times the size of France. They invaded Russia. And after they kicked France out of Russia, then Alexander I recognized Haiti's independence. And because of that, the US told France to go and back to Haiti because they did not want Haiti to have a relationship with Russia since then. So that is one of the reasons why they went back and asked, well, if you don't want to be re-enslaved, you're going to have to pay us a debt. In other words, guess what? We are going to occupy you, not physically, but economically. So that's what happened. So I agree they would have re-enslaved Haitians if the Haitians would not have paid the debt. And it was a condition. That's why they paid the debt. It was a condition not to be re-enslaved, not to be reoccupied. And it's written clearly. We don't want to be re-enslaved. We don't want to be reoccupied. So therefore, we paid for our freedom. So a lot of people don't understand that, but that's exactly the condition and the interaction that occurred between France and Haiti.
But let me remember in 1815 that the Cossacks were in Paris, occupied France, that the Russians occupied France in 1815 and to restore Louis XV. In the French history, it was at the time the Cossacks, and they opposed the division of France and the restoration of the monarchy. It's very complex. It's a very complex.
I understand, but you know, the story in the New York Times that came out that showed how the debt destroyed Haiti's economy. That story has a political motivation behind it.
No, look at what happened with the embargo on different countries. You can compare.
I understand.
You can compare what is happening in the Caribbean with Cuba. That's 60 years of embargo.
Yeah, the New York Times article came out because there is a struggle between U.S. and France in Africa right now, and a lot of people don't want to recognize that, but it is so. In West Africa, U.S. definitely and ambitiously want France out so that they can come in. This is one of the struggle that is going between them.
Now the Chinese.
The Chinese.
The Chinese.
No, the Chinese 100 times they invest in Latin America.
So there are a couple of questions. Jasmine had
in West Africa.
You don't know.
You're a professor, so you can speak loud.
But that is the struggle between the U.S.
So Jasmine
they will
and
still
then
support each other regardless. When it comes to wanting to maintain the imperialism, they will support each other regardless if there is struggle between them. And that's what we have to recognize. Whereas Africans, we tend to separate. When it's time to come together, we don't come together. We stay apart, but they will support each other, which is what U.S. is doing right now. It's still while it's struggling with France to get France out of Africa, it's still supporting France.
okay, so I'm sorry. Yes, I see Jasmine and then this gentleman. We don't have. Okay, okay,
No.
Kapali.
You need for the recording.
Yeah. If people can get in line, because we don't have unfortunately there isn't a hand mic. I think that gentleman was after, and if people can get in line, please. Yes.
Oui, merci, merci Professeur Daut et Professeur Voltaire pour discussion et merci Madame pour point que vous voulez faire. Je pense que l'important et c'est pour ça que je me dis merci et un paquet de bagages que nous mettez au contexte historique qui est important. Même pas c'est dans 200 ans après ça qu'on y a. Moi mes questions Professeur Accilien parce que l'on a dit qui ça concrètement nous pral faire qu'on y a, on pose des problèmes à Haïti, capacité nous à absorber, à gérer, etc. tout ça. Ça me t'a dit et que me t'a capable ouais si un consensus possible qui était capable de faire sous ça. C'est que je pense que il y a un problème fondamental qui fait qu'aucune discussion importante et sérieuse pas qu'on a fait avec la France sous bagage ça, c'est que nous pas gagné consensus national. Tout autant nous allons expliquer que nous pas gagné moyen pour nous prendre l'argent, nous gagnons peut-être un millier d'Haïtiens qui ont écrit sur ça, qui ont discuté ça. Professeur Daut dit un paquet de documents importants, intéressants qui écrit sous ça, nous pas connaissons nous-mêmes en tant qu'Haïtiens qui ça nous voulait. L'argent que nous payons, c'est l'argent nous, c'est Haïtiens nous y. Personne ne doit dire nous pas contre ça nous faire avec lui, nous pas absorber. Le Voltaire dit comme ça, c'est pour bagaille qui va le faire à court terme. Pas de problème, nous avons décidé que il a fait dit nous que nous l'argent puis abandonner. Et puis yo mettre l'en banque pour nos côté, mais nous besoin bagaille de reconnaissance même pour dire que l'argent ça c'est l'argent haïtien, c'est l'argent pas nous. Même si nous pas là dans Haïti qu'on y a. Alors si nous prenons parler avec la France pour demander l'argent, s'il pas un fonds commun, s'il pas que nous tout ensemble nous gagnons bagaille que nous voulons que nous d'accord sur lui, c'est brin à faire. Il peut pas le mener dans quel côté. Alors ces questions ça me t'a poser panel là. Est-ce que nous pensons que l'État est capable possible que tu as un monde qui prend responsabilité institutionnelle, gouvernementale, société civile, par contre ça pour que Haïtien soit capable de gagner une parole, une seule, qui semble un bloc qui campe devant la France. Parce que c'est seulement le SAM parce que nous avons gagné opinion internationale, parce que c'est ça nous gagne, pas gagne SAM. Opinion internationale, pour nous capables de voir de quelle mesure nous sommes capables de demander ça nous besoin. Merci.
I apologize. Does everyone understand? I failed to translate. Does everyone understand Creole?
I think so.
Oh, Creole? Oh, okay.
Okay, so tout le monde parle, tout le monde comprend Creole. Okay.
Créole parle.
Bon, moi-même, Jasmine,
Micro.
Jasmine, moi-même, moi pense qu'effectivement, ouais, il y a des questions qui soulevées après 200 ans, si ma pour retracer chronologie événement. Évidemment, il y a des gens qui ont réfléchi sur la question d'être là. Mais en termes politiques, c'est à partir de 2003 qu'Aristide est venu soulever la question. Et puis c'est intéressant.
Pour une raison bien simple. Parce que la France est fin de déclarer que l'esclavage, c'est
un crime contre l'humanité avec Christian Taubira. Oui, non, mais il y a deux bagages. Non, mais il y a après Taubira. Taubira, c'est sur l'esclavage. Mais attention, non.
Après ça.
Non, parce que Régis de Attends. Régis de Bré venu en Haïti. Ça, c'est parole qui
c'est après.
Non, mais attends. L'esclavage n'a rien à voir avec la restitution. La question, ça, il y a pour louer avec contexte là, mais il n'y a pas pour louer avec restitution. Restitution, l'autre, c'est pas mélanger deux questions. Parce que question restitution, à tout pays Caraïbe l'opposé. À tout pays. Non, l'opposé. Attends, je suis poursuivre chronologie. Bon, deuxièmement, quand Aristide soulevait, c'est intéressant. Régis Debray qui l'a noté. Monsieur dit Aristide, vous allez perdre le pouvoir. Vous allez perdre le pouvoir. On finit au fait que sorti qui relève la rançon de la dette par Vendry Lanose, côté vous rappelez question ça. C'est-à-dire, monsieur, nous allons perdre du pouvoir pour une raison très simple. À l'époque, c'est inacceptable pour la France. Peu après, c'est Sauvin gagnant ou gagnant. Le premier type qui reconnaît ça, ça a été François Hollande. Ils font discours, il a inauguré le mémorial contre l'esclavage là, et il arrive en Haïti pour très peu de temps. Et d'ailleurs, nous avons un discours là, ils ont publié, côté le devant avec Sweet Mickey, il dit, écoutez, c'est une dette morale. Bon, ça, c'est là, ils ont filmé, ils ont là, on est calé droit pour venir, tout discours là, ils ont écrit, Régis Debray écrit, il te dit, il y a des gens qui font combat ça aujourd'hui. Bon, moi-même, c'est pas ça, je dis simplement, où l'on processus qui prend temps, parce que c'est pas simplement haïtien, non, d'abord, même pour ta reconnaître là, du point de vue de la législation française, même pour d'abord, il faut reconnaître d'être là, et deuxièmement, il y a des changements législatifs pour faire. Pas oublier que, on vivre en France, les propriétés restituées des œuvres d'art du Quai Branly, pour être restituées, toute difficulté ça prend, il est obligé de changer loi en France pour restituer certaines œuvres d'art. Pas besoin qu'on y a pas l'eau, si vous avez une restitution, combien de temps ça va le prendre. Il ne faut pas penser que ce n'est pas simplement sous position l'État haïtien, une position contexte mondial actuel là, qui sont contextes effectivement qui pas propice à tout ça. Et mon contexte en France, avec une dette de plus de 3 000 milliards d'euros, effectivement, il est très difficile parce qu'il faut une opinion publique, il faut un changement législatif qui peut aborder lui. Et en plus, l'on ouvert son boîte de Pandore. L'on ouvert lui, ou ouvrir un processus qu'on est obligé de reconnaître un paquet l'autre type de réclamation. Pas oublier tout ça qui est passé avec, même soit suivre ça qui est passé après la Shoah, réclamation qui était faite pour restituer à qui on y a restitué. Dans quel contexte ça a restitué? Moi, simplement me dit, c'est pas.
Restitution, est-ce que c'est pas remettre l'argent?
Pas de bail.
Réparation, pour nous, réparation, c'est pour payer nous, pour nous que exploiter pendant des années.
Ça nous. Oui, mais pour l'on contexte. Nous d'accord. Oui, mais Lili, faut d'abord le processus là.
Et puis, nous avons docteur Daut en chance pour le répondre.
Nous parlons pour nous donner pour remettre l'argent, mais il n'y a pas d'argent. Moi, c'est d'accord, on a pas fait le processus, mais bon, on a fait, on n'a pas fait. On voit ensemble, tête ensemble, on les a demandé pour faire ça, ça. Et l'autre jour, on dit j'aspire ça. Moi-même, en discussion, on parlait pour faire Tiananmen Square. Si on peut laguer l'argent pour ça, mais l'argent nous capable de faire certainement mettre infrastructure médicale, mettre infrastructure, mettre l'argent de côté, mettons un groupe pour gérer l'argent, pour retirer Haïti dans l'État et
Ok, nous la conférence.
Tout le monde dit.
N'a fait Lili Papé, moi, la dit pas bien modéré. Mes amis me sont dit Washington, n'a fait Lili Papé, moi, il va dire mal modéré. Ok, n'a demandé docteur Daut répondre et puis après, monsieur a captain très patiemment pour poser question là.
No, I will just say briefly to Jasmine's question about the lack of consensus. I think that's correct. I mean, I see people in the newspapers even writing editorials in Haiti saying we're going to give the money to criminals, etc. Like arguing in essence against restitution, actually. But at the same time, I do think that the question of Haiti's leadership and governance is consistently used as a reason not to address the bringing it before the International Criminal Court of Justice, for example, or there are mechanisms, except that we saw that with the case of the UN and cholera, we saw that it's not actually technically the Haitian people who need to rally around a decision, it's the rest of the world who is not allowing any of these cases to really move forward or to be treated with the seriousness that they would be treated if it were another country. Because when we look at the other cases that went before, for example, the International Criminal Court of Justice, the Holocaust even, like there was consensus from the world that this was a just and right thing to do, that these inquiries that happened after other genocides, the Armenian genocide, for example, but the idea that Haitians are not worthy of the recompense is part of the problem, that their government is not worthy, that the people themselves, it's a part of the broader narrative that prevents the first part of the question from ever moving forward. But I do agree that there is also the question of what happens afterward. The only other thing I will say is that restorative justice is not just about money. There are other things that you have to do when you want to restore justice to a community, and we can look at those models from the United States and elsewhere. You restore justice to that community by mental health services for various things, but by all kinds of things. It's not aid, because aid suggests that the person giving it is then like owed a thank you. No, it's restorative justice, which means that it has to be undertaken in partnership with people living in Haiti right now, and they need to be asked, what do they want? And again, there won't be necessarily consensus, and it won't be the same for everyone everywhere, but that's also what's missing in the conversation, because it isn't just about money.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Daut, the gentleman who's being standing. Thank you for your patience. Merci.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Sarah, for organizing this conference. Thank you for your discourses. It's not difficult to conceive that this idea of blaming the victim is nonsense. It's madness. Now, unless it's well documented that the slaves came from a number of countries in Africa. So unless those governments, those heads of government accept that these people were not people, but animals, call them cows, pigs, whatever, they can make a claim that these countries who have taken their citizens to some kind of account so that the nonsense can stop. So it's really interesting to even today, in the age of the internet, that so many, if you ask many black people, Africans included, about Haiti, they know nothing. And considering that if it wasn't for what Haiti did, the black world would still be in slavery today. Now, with this being the case, why can't those governments do something so that those countries be accountable for what they did, instead of them asking for ransom and continuing the nonsense that they're doing today? That's the question.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is William Savary.
We can't hear you, William.
My name is William Savary. I live in Haiti and been doing research in Haiti for the last 40 years. Thank you, Franz. I appreciate your intervention. Dr. Daut, I appreciate your intervention. Thank you for your work. I have a couple of points that I wish to highlight that I think could help reinforce both of your presentations. The first point
Just ask to kind of keep it brief. I saw a couple of other hands
The first point I need to make is the double indemnity. The first portion of the debt was paid through a bond issue offered by Lafitte or floated by Lafitte at 6.5%. That was the first portion of the remedy. So the interest on that first portion is the double debt. The second point I wish to make is that the amount of the ransom, when I believe when it was agreed upon, it was really for the entire island. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I believe Boye may have been considering the potential of the island as a ratio, and the amount of the ransom as a ratio to the potential of the whole island. So, and then the resources, of course, of the eastern part. Third point I want to make, anytime somebody talks to me about the ransom that we've paid, I always love to tell them they should look at the value of gold at the time the ransom was paid. And if you look at the value of gold at the time the ransom was paid, remember we were living in the time of mercantilism, and a nation's wealth was measured in terms of how much gold they have. The amount of the ransom represented only about 90 tons of gold. I took my time and did the computation. And today, France's gold reserve is about 2,700 or 2,800 tons. So we're really not talking about a lot of money if we measure it in terms of gold. It's a percentage of the gold reserve. So you look at what percentage of 90 of the 2,700 does 90 represent? It gives you how much gold we can reclaim from France. Not money. And the gold can be put in the central bank and used as backup for our currency, increase the value of the currency, reduce inflation, a lot of other things that gold is used for.
Thank you, and I'll put Macron. Okay, I think I saw one or two other hands. Any other questions? Yes. And so the lady over there had a question, Marie-Nadine. If you can speak loud, maybe you can stand up if you don't want to use the mic.
About the commission itself, how was it formed? Who's part of it? Who gave them the mandate to negotiate with the French for the entire Haitian people?
Which commission?
The new commission.
The new commission?
Yes.
The new commission is not formed yet. It's one French historian and Gustigaya was named by the Haitian government to be part of this commission, but you don't have any commission yet. You have two co-presidents of the commission.
But how about on the Haitian part?
They name Gustigaya as the representative of Haitian part of the commission. She's a
government, the current government?
yes.
Well, yeah, government.
No. It's another
That's a
issue.
whole other.
But I can ask William, when you ask that the eastern part of the country at the time in 1825, they helped pay the interest of the debt until 1842 or 1843. But we have to remember that part of the Dominican nationalism, they said, we're not involved in that. That's Haitian part. They make us pay for a debt we didn't have. At that time, there were no plantation system or few plantation system in what will become the Dominican Republic. And so you have the problem that these people said, no, we're not involved in that. And it alimented the nationalism after the earthquake in 1842 in Cape Haitian. The people informed that the Haitian government doesn't respond. And you have three movements at the time. In the Dominican Republic, the new Dominican Republic, but also in the northern part of Haiti. There was a document where the generals from the north reclaimed a Confederate state. between the north, the Dominican part, and the west and southern part of Haiti. They said, we will have a pact, but we want a new Confederate state. That for that reason, that they named 3 generals from the north after Boyer, Guerrier, Richer, and it was Guerrier, Richer, and Pierrot. That for that reason. It's an issue on the 19th century we have to address, or maybe we need more studies on that.
Patiently, Marie-Nadine, I think, has a question. If you can speak up, maybe get to the mic.
I don't like talking in mics.
Okay.
But my question is actually a comment. My concern about the restitution is when I was in France, the Claude Libre, the Guadeloupean French-born Guadeloupean activist, historian, he has a great website, and his activism when I arrived to France in 2015 included restoring the statue of the Juma père, fils, and grandson to the 17th because the Nazis had broken it down, and then the French government never saw fit to restore them. So he had this decades-long activism to restore it, which was restored. I went to the commemoration, and I went with him to other activism. And one of the things that I heard from a group of other Caribbean, Martinicans and Guadeloupeans, was that if this money is returned to Haiti, how do they ensure that it's going to be used properly without corruption? And let me tell you what I was hearing in the back of what they were saying, is that a contingency of French people, regardless of what their color is going to arrive with with the money to whatever, oversee it. And that's my concern. I don't want any more recolonization of Haiti by France, along with people from the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, or Guyana. That's my one concern. My main concern about all of this is the feminization of poverty that the Indemnity caused. My mother was born in 1948, my father in 1944. None of their mothers were ever able to keep their children. And these are people who direct descendant of some of these generals. It's a real shame that there were never really good enough schools. My grandfather and so many people were denied education. If the family had a little bit of money, they sent the boy who seemed smarter than anyone else. But before, that problem didn't exist. They spent so much time and energy of their resources paying back this money, and the families had to make decisions that oftentimes seemed to me to hurt the girls more than the boys. Everyone ended up being hurt, but it just seemed to me, especially since when I found out that they cut trees that France used to make mahogany furniture. I mean, they can get rid of that. I mean, if it's antique from 200 years ago, they can sell it and pay me back what is old. I have no sympathy in my heart for people who spend all their extra discretionary income going on vacation, smoking cigarettes, and drinking whiskey. None whatsoever. They've taken my children, my books, my everything. Okay, so that's it. That's what I mean.
Well, I would just say, I mean, you might want to check out, if you haven't seen it already, Grace Sanders Johnson's book, White Gloves, Black Nation. It's really a great book about definitely the struggle of Haitian women through vast time periods, late 19th all the way up to almost the present, essentially, including to get the vote, many things, but schooling, certainly a big issue. Things in the legal realm as well. The fact that one of the big points she makes in her book, which is important and needs more elaboration, is when Boyer made the Code Rural, the reclassification of Haitian women as minors, which he got from the Code Napoleon because he constructed it with Blanchet, a French man who encouraged him to adopt principles from the Code Napoleon into Haiti's laws and legal structures. And those laws remained, some of them for a very, very long time. And so a lot of that, like, it's directly related, in other words, to the Code Rural coming about after the ordinance was signed, so that the ordinance could be paid, that the amount could be paid, and then the legal, like, so what happened to women in that, it's all folded in together.
Thank you so much.
Il y avait
I think maybe one last question.
John-
And one thing,
Johnny.
well, two last questions, Johnny and Narcisse. But one thing I would like to add to what Nadine says, we have to understand that the French wants to use Haiti as an example, so Martinique, Guadeloupe, Guyane. So I will take what many of them, I mean, I know there are some independencies, you know, with a grain of salt, because it's also this idea, look at Haiti. If you dare become independent, you will be the new Haiti. We won't be able to use the fusée d'Ariane in Guyana. So that has to also be contextualized. I call them colonies, you know, even though the Département d'Outre-mer, that's another word. So we have to put that in that context. So Johnny and then Jasmine.
Okay, thank you very much. I thought this was a pretty interesting panel, a conversation, and chock full of facts, and I hope that they've all been used to good, and they will be used to good, put to good use, you know, in the long way. I don't have a question. I just want to tell you a number of things. One, tomorrow there's going to be a conversation about how to deal with the reparations. I'm a member of a newfound group called the CUNY Haitian Afro-descendant, which deployed a lot of resources the other day when the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent held its fourth session at the UN, and we were very forceful in demanding reparations. The idea behind the organization is that, first of all, it's called Comité Haïtien Afro-descendant, primarily because, to some extent, we want to make sure that Haitians do reconnect with their African roots. To a certain extent, 1825, as far as I'm concerned, is a marker. It's a marker that basically says this is, and you can take it, and perhaps I'm wrong, but it's a marker, as far as I'm concerned, that says Haiti became, as a result of the signing of the ordinance, a neo-colony of France. So the challenge that we have today, is frankly, it's not about simply getting some money back. It's really establishing once again the independence of Haiti. Haitians have become independent, and they have to rid themselves of a number of prejudices that they have gained throughout centuries, throughout years, that have been handed down for centuries, that made them feel inferior to French or to the white world. So that's number thing. The second thing is that obviously I agree with Franz that says it's a long struggle. It is going to be a long struggle. I'm not going to see the benefits of that struggle, but I am, and I'm inviting everyone in this room to be part of that struggle, so that struggle continues. But one of the things that we have to do is really get our act together. I mean, we can't just, obviously we have a lot of sentiment and so forth, but in order to fight, in order to regain the kind of, or to make the kind of advances that we need to have, we need to make sure that we are speaking all in the same voice, that we are speaking in unison, that we are marching in lockstep, so that to some extent, and we have to make sure that we go forward together. Otherwise, we are going to be discussing endlessly about whether or not we are capable of governing ourselves. Because this is what it's all about. When you're questioning the fact that, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the money if it's restored. Well, let's dream a little bit. If the money is restored, I've got 50 people here in this room, who are highly qualified in their own ways to manage public sector issues and to be forcefully involved, in education, healthcare, and whatever economic initiative. So let's stop the nonsense. let's get together and make sure that we go forward together. Thank you.
Johnny, some of us cannot even agree that France owes us. Start from the beginning.
Okay, I think. Okay, en mot.
Oui.
En mot.
Juste une chose.
Maybe. Yes.
On va parler fort, non? C'est pas.
Non, c'est
pas. Mon mic là.
Moi je vis en France, hein, en France. Si on comprend un peu ce que la presse française fait récemment, c'est que il n'y a pas la presse française, hein, de manière générale, pensait que faut que la France restitue l'argent. Tiens, on va regarder, on a remarqué que ce soit à la télévision, dans les journaux, bon sort de consensus général, je parle de la presse, hein, pour que la France restitue. Bon, dans la qui pense qui est essentiel, ce dont nous avons besoin, c'est le principe, n'est-ce pas, de la restitution. Nous avons besoin que l'État français, bon, dame qui dit, pour un document, ce serait l'idéal, que l'État français reconnaisse que son mal terrible, ça terrible non. Et que
en reconnaissance de dette.
Voilà, c'est tout, quelque chose dans ce niveau-là. Bon. Maintenant, pour un monde qui n'est pas là, de questions légales, je crois que c'était le 21 mai 2001, Taubira prend une loi qui dit que l'esclavage c'est un crime contre l'humanité. Le cabinet Aristide là de l'époque, moi, Claude, frère, un cousin de Jean-Claude, monsieur, réélé moi-même personnellement à l'époque, on en Haïti, monsieur dit que c'est essentiel, il faut que nous avancions sur le monsieur dans le cabinet Aristide, type ça. Et c'est après que, en 2003, que Aristide fait déclaration là, qui sortit dans le bon, n'est-ce pas, pour Français, ambassadeur français, paniqué, etc. Maintenant, question ça arrivé au cœur de l'État français. C'est une avancée importante. Discussion sur est-ce que nous pourrons le faire chèque ou bien nous pourrons la conduire à mettre l'argent là. C'est de la foutaise. Excusez-moi, mais bon. Non, mais la question en plus, mon cas dit que la France pauvre, 21 milliards de dollars, tant qu'on dit, c'est la date spin, ça. Parce que gilet jaune, non, gilet jaune, il y a quelques années, dans la rue, on n'a rien dedans. Plusieurs millions ont été trouvés, comme par miracle, n'est-ce pas? Bon. Maintenant, qu'il y ait une commission mixte qui vous discute de ça, ça me paraît normal, mais ce dont nous avons besoin, c'est la reconnaissance, c'est la ligue politique de l'État français pour lui dire non, voilà, gain restitution. Le reste, qui s'en va faire comme là, ça n'a décidé. N'a décidé. Mais bon principe qui a été établi, on est en discussion et bien entendu, il faut qu'il y ait différents aspects là-dedans, militantisme, diplomatie, etc. Mais le principe est établi que bonne injustice que des faits, non? Injustice en mettant nous là et nous là. Bien entendu, moi-même, Baboual dit que bon, une voie dans l'histoire pays, n'est-ce pas, qui contribue et tout, pour l'injustice là, c'est pas ça m'a discuté. M'a discuté avec l'État français. Vous voyez? Que des voyous, et pas des gens de voix, non? Nous comprenons monde là, nous connaissons des gens qui étaient volés, oui. Mais c'est pas ça m'a discuté. D'accord? C'est pour ça que Johnny a raison. Il dit que c'est pour nous mettre d'accord sur mais ça n'a fait, n'est-ce pas? On est sûr que bon point central, c'est restitution, et puis pour nous évaluer, et puis pour le reste, c'est nous-mêmes qui vous décider.
Oui, je pense que pour nous clôturer, je dit tout le monde merci. I want to thank everybody, and I think to wrap up, I would just like to add, we have to have the young people in the center of this conversation, both in terms of youth and in terms of gender. Oftentimes, we are having this conversation and there are not enough youth. Haiti is over 50% people under 25, I think the latest statistic. And if you have not seen it, I really encourage you to watch Raoul Speck, Federal Assistance. He talks about that. I'll just read part of a quote. He said, La corruption et la stupidité n'est pas une spécialisation caribéenne ou africaine. Corruption and stupidity. And he said, it is important to understand that we live in a system that is profoundly and fundamentally rotten and contradictory. One which does the very opposite of what it purports to do and presents itself differently than it really is. We exist in an eminently structured economic context whose founding principles are that money and profit are the overarching factors which determine the totality of actions, connections, and relationships among nations, which determines who is rich and who is poor, who exploit, who is a victim, and who is rewarded. As far as I know, neither corruption nor stupidity nor mismanagement is exclusively a Caribbean or African specialty. That's Raoul Peck. And I'll end on that. Merci en pile. Come back tomorrow. Vini encore de merci de vous m'appeler Dr. Cerat dit dernier parole là.
Merci en pile. Tant pis, Indeminty, Dr. Cécile Accilien, professeur Daut, professeur Voltaire, merci pour la conversation ça que vous faites. Nous connaissons, oui, Franz, nous connaissons son processus. Mais nous commençons ce processus. Et c'est extrêmement important parce qu'il faut nous prendre ça tout. Il y a un paquet de côtés à faire, même quand tu conférence là. Collège de France, en juin, pour regarder et Indemnity. Et Association études haïtiennes, en octobre, on était chita s'opposer ça tout. Faut que parole en parler. Faut le parler et il fait partie du processus là. Mais en même temps, il y a un monde dans la salle là que je me reconnaître, c'est Stéphanie Delia, qui est directeur exécutif en Haïti, mais qui sont avocats liés. Objectif nous tous dans différentes conversations ça c'est faire association avocats haïtiens à travers les États-Unis on met tête ensemble pour penser légalement tout à qui ça yo même yo ka contribuer dans bataille ça. So, c'est un objectif que nous voulons et une recommandation que nous fait d'en faire. Maintenant puis dis ça merci avec un bon et plutôt on a dit nous parole là continue à parler et demain si Dieu veut nous mais avant de quitter mon ça aller quitter tout ça et professeur Accilien en été ici là nous avons un cours qui relève Haiti in the city global education at home and it's for CUNY students who have completed 15 credits. I would love to invite all three of you to come speak to these youngsters, and we are in our third year, so there'll be 3 cohorts together. So we could do one session where you have a panel and engage with about 50 young people, much younger than what you're saying. So that we can prepare fella will. Parce que nous pas pour aller bailler comme là, mais nous faut ne pas pour yo connaître, faut nous bailler comme là.
Les petites mains viennent dans comme là.
N'a nous de merci, je veux merci en pile nous tout qui fait du
Vous dites là.
I'll show you because I'm like that. Oui. Because I'm like that's your. I hope I get in. I have to make up sometimes.
But I did about Julia. Julia. Oh, okay.